It was there that Konev planned to launch his main thrust, and he had chosen it for only one reason. A breakthrough in that area would allow a dash for Berlin at the soonest possible moment. Under cover of smoke, the first of Konev's battalions began crossing at 5:55 a.m. Russian artillery and machine guns, firing on a flat trajectory, blazed all the while, forcing the Germans to stay under cover while bridging equipment was brought up. An hour after the first troops crossed, Konev's tanks and self-propelled guns were in action on the west side of the Neisse and racing for the river Spree. By 10 a.m. on the morning of Zhukov's attack at Zilao, Soviet bombers had smashed most of the German heavy guns on top of the ridge. The Russian artillery had been redeployed forward, and now it too added its weight to the storm unleashed on German positions. By now, elements of Zhukov's First Guards Army had overrun the German trenches at the foot of the Zilao Heights. However, the last line was proving impossible to storm. Zhukov decided to send in his 2 tank armies. The terrain was totally unsuitable, and within hours, 1,300 tanks and self-propelled guns were locked in one vast traffic jam under the fire of German artillery. It would take 3 days, and in all, 30,000 Russian dead, before Zhukov would finally take the heights and begin his frantic dash for the German capital. While Zhukov was stalled at the Zilao Heights, Konev's first Ukrainian front had reached the upper stretches of the Spree, the river that flowed through the heart of Berlin. Finding it fordable, lead tanks dashed across. The German line was quickly shattered, and on reporting to Stalin, Konev was told exactly what he wanted to hear. He could turn his 2 tank armies towards Berlin. That same day, April the 18th, 50 miles north of Berlin, Marshal Rokossovsky's Second Belarusian Front launched its assault on the lower reaches of the River Oder. Second Belarusian would be met by more than 30 German counterattacks. It would take 2 days for Rokossovsky's forces to break out of their bridgeheads, and casualties would be heavy. However, the offensive was fulfilling its main function. It was keeping the German 3rd Panzer Army away from the defense of Berlin. On the morning of April the 20th, Adolf Hitler's 56th birthday, with Russian forces only 20 miles from Berlin, American bombers launched the final 1,000-bomber raid of the war. The effect, on a city already reduced to rubble, was to sever the last of its water and gas supplies. For Berlin's civilian population, tens of thousands of whom were living in cellars, scavenging what food they could, it was one more sign that the end was near. Shortly after the last American bombers headed for home, Adolf Hitler emerged from his bunker into the Chancellery Garden for his traditional birthday celebration. Instead of the customary parade of 40,000 soldiers, the Führer, his eyes glassy and his hands trembling, was greeted by a handful of Hitler Youth and SS. After this bizarre valediction, the Führer would never be seen in public again. By April the 21st, Marshal Zhukov's 2nd Guards Tank Army had reached the northeastern suburbs of Berlin. Meanwhile, tanks of the 47th Army raced to outflank the city from the north, while along the center, 6 armies pressed forward. The German 9th Army was now hopelessly cut off from the rest of Army Group Vistula. To the south of the city, Konev's tank armies, dashing for Zossen and Potsdam, had driven straight through 4th Panzer. 4th Panzer's left wing was now being pushed into a pocket with the 9th. The bulk of the German forces supposed to defend Berlin were left surrounded and helpless. Forward elements of Zhukov's first Belarusian front had already begun to shell the center of Berlin. For Russian artillerymen, it was an unmistakable sign that victory was near. The message was not lost on senior Nazi officials. They fled the city in droves, taking with them as many valuables as they could. 2 million ordinary citizens had no such hope. For men, even the very young and the very old, the penalty for trying to leave was death. The day after Marshal Konev's spearheads penetrated the Berlin suburbs, his prize already in range of his guns, Stalin, at a stroke, dashed his hopes of being hailed as the conqueror of the Nazi enemy. Zhukov was to take the Reichstag, the outstanding symbol of German might. Konev's line would be allowed no closer than 150 yards. Throughout the ranks of his first Ukrainian front, there was bitter disappointment. The men would still have to fight and die, but the laurels would go elsewhere. On April the 24th, units of 1st Belarusian and 1st Ukrainian fronts met southwest of Berlin. The capital was surrounded. The same day, American and Russian troops met on the River Elbe. Germany had been cut in two. As the Russians had swung around Berlin to complete its encirclement, the pocket, which held the German 9th Army and part of the 4th Panzer Army, had been squeezed inexorably. Inside were 200,000 men, 300 tanks, 2,000 guns, and tens of thousands of trapped refugees. Only the German 12th Army to the west, commanded by General Wenck, seemed to offer any hope. Hitler ordered Wenck to link up with 9th Army and relieve the capital. On April the 26th, Wenck attacked, penetrating to within 15 miles of Berlin before stalling. 2 German corps would eventually succeed in breaking out of the 9th Army pocket and joining up with the 12th, but the rest would perish to a man. By